Hello everyone, and this is the rendering section of the Harry Houdini training. So I was supposed to upload this, I believe sometime end of November, early December, and then I got lazy, so I'm uploading it now. Anyway, this is the Redshift version, and then I'll make Octane and Arnold and Mantra. And once I've uploaded all 4 videos, I will upload the files, the Houdini files, directly on Gumroad. So all of those who have purchased the training will automatically get like a download notification that new files have been added to the product, so you can just download those. So I'll upload 4 zip files, one for each render engine, and you can download whichever one you want. You want to download all 4, you can download all 4. Okay, so where do we? So I'm going to do 2 different setups. I'll do one for fur and then I'll do one for hair. So they're not very different, but yeah, like for fur you can do anything from like a basic animal to a stuffed toy or a carpet. So you want to the big difference that happens between like hair and fur, like human hair, is you very rarely need to upload, or you very rarely need to texture human hair, right? Like with animal fur or with carpets and stuff, you'll always need to texture. Like if you have a carpet texture, then you want the fur to pick up that texture. So that's one thing that usually you need to do if you're doing fur of any sort. Like if you're doing a zebra, then you have like a zebra texture or whatever. So that's probably the big difference. So yeah, so which is why I'm doing like 2 separate files. Okay, so this is, as I said, this is the Redshift version. I've done a basic setup. So I have 2 light domes. This is the main light dome for rendering, which has like an HDR. I'll upload the HDR with the file, so you can download that. So I have an HDR for lighting, but it's not affecting the background. And then I have a second light dome which is just for background. Like it's not affecting diffuse and specular. It's just for background purposes. And yeah, I have like the basic render engine, so nothing too fancy. And I have 2 materials that I have assigned. Like one is for the body, and then this is the original fur material that I had already built up, but this is a new one that I have assigned for now. Okay, so if you want to render fur or hair in Redshift, there's basically one thing that you need to do, which is you need to convert your fur from polygon curves to NURBS curves. Okay, so at the end of, like, once you've done your hair setup and everything, what you want to do is, like, if you click on the eye over here, you'll notice that these are polygons. So what you need to do is you just need to add like a convert node, and you convert it to NURBS curves, right? So once you convert it to NURBS curves, Redshift will automatically recognize it as like hair curves and render it. So you don't need to turn on any buttons or anything like that. It'll just automatically recognize it. Okay, so another thing you need to do is if your base geometry has UVs and you want those UVs to be picked up by the hair, then you get an option within the hair generate. Okay, like if I look at my base geometry over here, then since this has a shader, which I later on removed, but since this has a shader, I'll just do hide other objects. Yeah. So this has UVs. Like if you look at this, like if you turn off add shader, then the UVs are gone. Okay. Oh, they're still there. Fine. Anyways. So you have UVs. I thought they would get removed once you remove the shader, but anyways, it doesn't matter. Okay, so it has UVs. So what you do is, like if you look at the, if we split the pane and I see the UVs, then you'll see, like, there you go. Okay, so this has UVs. So what you want is, like, these UVs need to transfer onto the hair in order for the hair to be able to pick up a texture of any sort. So the setup is fairly simple. What you need to do is, let me just come to the end. Yeah, so what you need to do is in the hair generate node, in the attributes and appearance tab, come down to source attribute transfer, and in vertex attribute just type in UV. Now I am still on 17.0.352, and the problem that's happening there is I'm not getting anything on the drop down list. Like the UVs are there on the uh, like on the base geometry, and technically it is supposed to show me, but it doesn't. And it also gives me this error. Anyways, so what you just need to do is just type in UV and it's done. Okay, if you're on a later production build and it's showing you, great. Even if it doesn't show you, just type in UV. If your base surface or your base geometry has UV coordinates, the hair will automatically pick it up. And what happens is it gets transferred over to primitives, like it becomes like a primitive attribute on the hair. Okay, so that's the one thing you need, or those are the two things you need to do if you are going to start rendering fur. Now, if you want to subdivide the fur, then you get an option in the Redshift node, which is if you come to Redshift and if you come to Redshift and if you come to system, you'll find something called hair tessellation. And so what you can do is you can either tessellate it 4 times or 8 times. So that will it's like a subdivision. It'll automatically subdivide the hair. So if you're seeing like polygonal geometry, like if the hair isn't smooth enough, you can go in there and sort of subdivide it. In this case, we won't need to because the hair is too short. It won't really make a difference. Anyway, so those are the things you need to remember if you're going to start rendering hair in Redshift. Okay, so the way to start is fairly simple. I'm just going to press render view and that should do it. Now this is particularly huge at the moment, so I'm going to just lower the render size a little. So I'm just going to come in here and like I've set the IPR to a custom size. So let me just make it about, let's try 800 by 700. Okay, that should be good enough. Okay, so now I'll come into the SharpNet and we'll set up the shader. So right now I've just assigned it like a default RS material, which is not the one that you want to use. What you want to do is just type in hair and you will get RS hair. Okay, and if you assign it, it's fairly straightforward. It'll assign hair. Okay, so the way it works is it has 4 different areas that you need to control. Like it has additional options for transparency if you want to add transparency, which usually I don't think you want to do transparency with hair. It'll take too long to render. Then you have like additional stuff for ray tracing, like if you want to control the trace depth and stuff. Anyway, so this is not really important. Okay, so where you start off with is I'm just going to make all the values 0. Okay, so we can just work on them one by one. So I'm just going to take all of these and make them 0. Yeah, so we just have like, black hair. Okay, so this is sort of like the main color. Okay, so if you just make this 1, you'll see like it picks up, like that's the color of your hair. And let me just rotate this a little bit. I'm going to take the light dome and just sort of spin it. Yeah, I think this is good. Okay, so it's called internal reflection because it is kind of a reflection. And you can sort of make that out. Like if you get the glossiness higher, you'll start seeing, your highlights. And if you get the glossiness low, it will blur out the highlights. So it'll become much more sort of softer. So if you're doing like a soft toy and you want like fairly soft looking fur, then you keep the glossiness relatively low. You can also just say show highlights. So it kind of just shows the specular values, but usually you want to keep this on. So we get, a little bit. So yeah, so if you're doing fur, like usually you want to keep the glossiness slightly lower. And if you're doing hair, because hair is a little more shiny, then you can keep it, somewhere around like 0.7 is good for hair. So I'll keep this to around 0.4 for now. And let me again make that 0. Then you get diffuse color. So if you want to give it like a flat color, then you can work with diffuse color. But diffuse color is not like if you're doing like really, you want to do like renderable curves and stuff, then diffuse color is fine. If you're doing hair and fur, then keep diffuse weight to 0. You don't need to, sort of work with that. But what you can do is you can give it a little bit of translucency if you want that. So if I take the light and I just take it completely behind, So you can see like, light sort of coming through the edges over here. So you can give the hair a little bit of translucency. But even if you don't do translucency through diffuse, you have the transmission value, which is kind of the same. Like if I get the weight to 1, you'll see it sort of does the same thing. Okay, you'll see the light sort of coming in through the hair. Okay, and if you do transmission, it is sort of the same. The big difference between transmission and the translucency weight is that you get the glossiness control. And what that does is, if you keep it very high, like if you just want the edges to sort of have a little bit and then nothing in the middle, then you can do that with the glossiness. You don't get that control in translucency. And you can also like control the width, which sort of blends it a little more. And if you keep it high, it will be like really on the edges. So if you just want it on the edges, you can do that. And then if you lower the length glossiness, then it will sort of fade in a little bit more. So you can kind of choose what you want, like how much you want it. Okay, and lastly, you get reflections. So if I just get the reflection to around 0.5, okay, now if you get it to 1, it almost looks like steel. So yeah, don't do that. Like don't keep it very high. And again, you have like a glossiness value to define like how sharp the reflections will be or how blurred out the reflections will be. So this is sort of like a secondary layer of reflection. Like you have your internal reflections which are colored, and then you can have like, because hair usually has like, 2 levels of reflection. You can also keep it to highlights only. So you will just get the specular, kind of like the internal reflections. And you can also shift the hair highlights. Usually like -5 is good, but if you want to shift the highlights altogether, you can see them kind of move. And lastly, you can also, like by default, it's just like a reflection value. But if you wanted to, if you want to control it using a Fresnel IOR, you can turn that on. So now I can bring this to 1 and then get the Fresnel IOR to give me a reflection. So if you bring in everything, then you get like a fairly decent looking hair. So let's say if I bring this to around like 0.5. Okay, and then I want to give it some amount of transmission. So let's bring that up. See, so then you have, the edges lighting up. Let's say if you want to give it like a different color, you can do that. See, so you can have like, slightly more interesting looking hair. Maybe bleed it in a little more. Or if you want like fair bit of bleeding coming in, you can just increase the translucency weight and give this a similar color. Yeah. See, it's like if I get this really high, see. So if you want to do like a soft toy or something, this is really nice. And then along with that, let's say if I want to bring in reflections, then I can give it reflections. So let me just get the light dome back to, let's say 80. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I'll just let it render once. Yeah, let me just check what my render setting is, because it might be little, like the sampling might be too high. Yeah, let me make it, I'll make it 32 by 256. The one thing you need to remember is that if you add a lot of translucency, the render will slow down. So like if you add translucency and then if you turn on global illumination, it will slow down the render. Like it looks very soft and the result is nice, but you should be aware that render times will go up. Yeah, so there you go. So this is, the basic render that we get. Okay, so I'll create a snapshot of this. Now you get 2 additional nodes with Redshift for controlling the hair a little bit more. Okay, so the first one, I'm going to turn off the bucket render and let's get rid of the translucency. Yeah, we'll just work with length glossiness. Okay, so the first node you get, let me get rid of that, is if you type in hair, you'll get something called hair position, which essentially allows you to color hair based on the length of the hair. Okay, and then you also get something called as hair random color. So if you want to like randomize the color of the fur, you can do that. Now, along with that, as I said, because we have transferred UVs, we can also pick up a normal texture. So if I take a texture and let's say if I'll just pick up a texture here. Okay, I had picked up a texture once before. So I'm just going to like, let me just see what I have. Yeah, so I have like this flowery pattern over here, and you don't really need to do anything. Like if I just take this, I'm going to turn off the transmission and the reflection. So I just have like the base color. And if I just plug this into base color, into the internal reflection color, you'll automatically be able to see yeah, you might need to refresh your render, but there you go. Now you can see the texture. Okay, like it might not update automatically, but you can see the texture now. So if I just come in here and let me try to adjust the gamma a little. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see, so you can see the texture now. So as I said, like the only thing you need to make sure is that in the hair generate, you transfer the UV attributes. Like this is important. Like you come to attribute and appearance, and in source attribute transfer, you transfer the UVs. Then the hair or then the fur will pick up whatever texture you give it. Okay, now as I said, so you have like a couple of nodes here. So this one is for randomization. So if I just plug this in, it has a single base color. So let's just keep it to there. And then what you can do is like if you want to randomize the hue amount, like I can just take this to 1 and you'll see it randomizes the hue. Or if you want to randomize the value, then you can randomize the values. Okay. And if you want to randomize saturation, then you can randomize saturation. So what you can do, which is interesting, is like if you have a fur texture and you can put that texture through the hair random color. So what that allows you to do is you can actually get variations on that through the hair random node. So if I just adjust the saturation or value amount, so you'll get like variations on that. So it becomes much more, you get more natural looking stuff. Okay, with the hair position, what you want to do is just take an RS ramp and plug it in through the ramp. Okay, so just take the out scaler and plug it into input and then plug it into whichever color you want to control. See, so you'll get, like a color along the length of it. So if I take, let's say if this is to be red, and then I can just take this and, bring it ahead. Yeah, see, there you go. So you can sort of control the hair length in this fashion. Okay. So yeah, so let's say if we take a vector multiply and I'm just going to plug in, the hair texture with this, see, so you can do something a little more fancier. Yeah, so you can have fairly interesting looking hair and fur. So yeah, so just to give you an idea, so this took 1 minute 40 seconds, and that's primarily because it has translucency, right? So if I turn that off, this will render a lot faster because it doesn't have any translucency. So as you can see, that rendered in like 23 seconds, about 24 seconds. So if you have translucency in your hair, it will take a lot longer to render. You should just remember that. So yeah, so this is basically it. So this is how you can set up, hair and fur. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly also do another file for hair. Okay, like this was for fur. The settings don't really change, but just to show you how to render hair. So I'm going to open up another file. Let me save this. And I'll open up another file for rendering hair. Okay, the one thing you need to sort of remember if you're rendering hair is the trick is to have fairly thin hair and a lot of density. Means what you want to do is like the thickness should be fairly low and you keep like a ridiculously high count. Okay, because if you have thicker hair, it just looks terrible. Okay, like it doesn't look realistic at all. So what you want is, if you want to do very realistic looking hair, you keep it fairly, like you keep the thickness very low or the width attribute, and you keep the quantity relatively high. Okay, and that gives you good looking hair. Okay, so the setup is roughly the same. I'm just going to hit render view just so you get an idea. And let me just, I'm going to turn it off. Yeah. So I've roughly done the same thing. I have two shaders, and right now it's just, a simple RS material. So I'll just replace this with a hair material. So I can do hair. And there you go. Like mostly it works pretty much, straight out of the box. If you want to do like blonde hair, you keep the weight fairly high, so it's relatively bright, and you also keep the color sort of relatively desaturated. So keep the saturation to around 0.5 and a little more towards yellow, and that will give you, better looking blonde hair. And again, like if I just turn off the primary reflections and the weight from the internal reflections, so you just want a little more like light to bleed in if you're doing blonde hair. So like you probably want to get this weight a little bit higher and get the length a little low and the width a little low, so you get like a little more color to sort of bleed in, and maybe get this to be a little bit brighter as well. And then you can just, personally I prefer to work with Fresnel, so you can just turn that on, get this all the way to 1, so you'll get reflections, and then get this like relatively high to about like 2 should be good enough, and then we can get this weight to 1. See, so you get, fairly nice looking blonde hair if you want. If you want to do like dyed hair, like if you want to do hair which is like darker, at the roots and then lighter towards the tips, then we can use the hair position node. So if I take the hair position, and I can just take the ramp, and what we can do is, let's copy this color. So I'm going to do the right click and copy parameter. Let this be the final color. So let's do paste relative reference. No, sorry, don't paste relative reference. Just do paste values. Yeah. And here as well, we'll do paste values. But this one, I'll go slightly darker. Now this is one way to do it. Okay, another way, like let's just see what this looks. See, there you go. So if you want this to be, something like that. Yeah, let me just turn this off so we can see what it finally looks like. Yeah, so there you go. So this is how you can do, like if you want to do like dyed hair or stuff like that, then you can just control it with this. So what this means is that you can also do, something like, so what this means is that if you change this base color to something else, like let's say if you make it green, and I'll turn that off. See, so you can get like, if you want to do like dyed hair, you can do that. But another way to make it look like dyed hair, but without having to do like fancy colors, is we can also control the internal reflection weight. So what I can do is, instead of doing a color over there, like let it be like a flat blonde color, and then I can just take an RS ramp and I'll plug in, plug in the out scalar, not the out vector. The result is the same, but yeah. And then take the out color and let's plug it into the internal reflection weight. So you'll get the same result, but I don't have to play with colors then. So it gives you, a similar thing, and just make this like a light gray or something, because we're dealing with values instead of just a flat color. So yeah, so you can do stuff like this. And then if you want, we can give it like a little bit of randomization to, so what we can do is we can control the value here, and we can just randomize the color a little bit to make it look a little more natural. Okay, so what I can do is I can take a hair random color. Let's put this color over there. So copy parameter, paste values, and plug this in. Sorry, I copied the wrong one. Yeah, so copy this one. Copy parameter, paste values. Yeah, so what you can do then is like give it a little bit of hue amount, and a little bit of value. So you'll get a little bit of variation in the hair to make it look a little more natural. The darker you want the shade, the darker these values essentially get, right? So if I just take this value or the weight over here like fairly low, you can do darker hair. The color doesn't change too much. You always stay somewhere within like the light brown area, and then you adjust the weight value to get like you want to have like dark hair or light hair, and make it slightly reddish if you want to do like reddish hair. Like that's basically it. You don't need to do too much. Yeah, so let me just do a final render here. We can also plug in the same value into the transmission color. So even the transmission or the translucency gets like a little bit of variation to it. So let me do a final render, and then that's basically it. The other thing to remember is since Redshift supports attributes, you can always use, like if you have some attribute based color, you can also use that. Like that's not complicated. You can just type in like user data. So yeah, you can just do like RS user data. So if you have color or something, you can just bring that in. But we're not going to right now. Like it's not really important. But yeah, like usually that's more for like FX purposes. Like if you're doing like some VFX shot and you have like a lot of curves which have color and stuff on it, then it's nice to be able to do that. But not when you're doing, hair. Anyway, so this is basically it. So if I just look at my snapshot, yeah, so this is with the value, like where we have the ramp connected into the weight of the internal reflection color. And this is when we had applied like a straight up color, into the internal reflection color directly. But yeah, either ways is fine. Like you can go with, whatever you like. Blonde hair is usually the most difficult. The rest of it is actually fairly simple. You just go darker and it looks perfectly fine. But yeah, so this is basically it. So this is how you render hair or fur with Redshift. So as I said, I'll upload all the files together once all the videos are done. So I'll upload like one video a day. So I'll upload like Redshift today, and then Octane tomorrow, and then Arnold and Mantra. So I'll upload one every day. So hopefully at the end of the 4 days, I'll upload the files to Gumroad, and you can download from there. Alright, so this is basically it. So this is how you render hair and fur with Redshift.